Okay, so again, as I said, today's webinar is Children's Images Online, Exploring Ethical Issues in Participatory Research Project. This is in partnership with University of Edinburgh, Scotland, with a number of other partners. And Professor Tisdall is going to introduce all other partners in a few minutes. I just wanted to highlight one or two things before we start. If you are in a Twitter, please use hashtag child participation, hashtag child research is all here, child voice, and hashtag COVISION. Really appreciate. And also we are all in the Twitter, follow us on the Twitter as well. Again, COVISION is a global project funded by Health Research Board Ireland and Research Council Ireland. This is to explore strategies in the home community where children's creative and innovative response have helped them and their friends and families adjust to the changes during and after the pandemic. So it will also look at how children's action in the pandemic may affect the ability of others in their community to adjust changes. So this webinar is in partnership with the University of Edinburgh. So from here, I'm going to hand over to Kay Tisdall. Before I hand over to Kay, can I just show you one more key etiquettes of a Zoom, because we are all in the Zoom. Just one more slide, this one. Again, I just want to tell you, if you can use your name and your organization, just give an example of Kay Tisdall. You can see Kay, University of Edinburgh. Say hello to the chat and introduce yourself. If you have any difficulty, we are here to help you. Just send a message through chat functions. Please make sure you mute your microphone and turn off your video during the presentations. Any difficulties, please contact us, and recording section will be available later on if you request, and you will get it from one of us. Okay, thank you very much and very welcome to the webinar. I'm going to hand over to Professor Kay Tisdall. Kay is yours now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and how truly exciting to have this event. It just seems very timely, and hopefully we'll have a wonderful conversation as we go on. Yep, so I'm Kay. I work at the University of Edinburgh as part of the Childhood and Youth Studies group. And I work with COVISION, and I'm learning very much from that, but also working in a number of other projects. And we've been having these debates about using images of children online. And we just thought it was a wonderful occasion to learn and perhaps debate, discuss, and see where we get to in terms of moving forward. So some of the other people who have come along today and will give some spotlight presentations, etc., are from two other projects. So one is Safe, Inclusive, Participative Pedagogy, SIP for short, which is about improving early childhood education. And it's funded by the UKRI and the Global Challenges Research Fund. So I've done that for the funder. And they involve teams, as well as in Edinburgh, in Brazil, Eswatini, Palestine, and South Africa. And some will be speaking, and some will also already have signed up and will be part of the discussion. And equally for Froebelian Futures, which Simon's going to be talking soon, and it's about to launch in 2 weeks. Yeah, so it's just starting out, funded by the Froebel Trust. And it's a research, policy, and practice program, primarily, but not solely, focused on young children and their families and working with early years practitioners and organizations. So it's also a partnership project with Cowgate Under 5 Centre, which is an early years centre in Edinburgh, and the University of Edinburgh, and has some outreach as well throughout Scotland and with colleagues in Greece and the Czech Republic. So as I'm saying, all of these projects, perhaps a little bit because of my concerns, to be fair, sort of been raising these things about the ethical issues of children's images online. And I think what's particularly interesting us, but we'll see where the discussion goes, is that we're having examples of child-led research, or very participatory research, or children as experts and as advisors. And as we're sort of very excited, I think, about having that kind of engagement with children, we're finding some of the implications and testing in terms of maybe the conventions that we've had previously in terms of images of children, and particularly images of children online. So if you are having children being researchers, then what about their agency, their decisions, for example, and how they are presented and indeed can share their research, particularly online? So just to say that we may find that we have strong views, and I think that's a good thing. And then I think in the conventions of these things, I suppose particularly for today, is suggest that we're just very respectful that actually we may have quite different views and teasing out perhaps the assumptions behind them. And then just to run over, and Suja, maybe the next slide then, what we're planning to do is just, we've invited 4 people just to give spotlights, just a few views, hopefully from slightly different perspectives, just to get us thinking, so 4 people there. And then we'll open up for discussion. So that's the next slide, Suja, with Marlies bravely taking us through the discussion and chat, and hope you feel very energized. We do have a slide of tricky questions, just in case that inspires us for the discussion. But we hope that will be very lively and really take us forward. And then with the slight change is, while Harry is with us, Helen's going to wrap us up for the day from the COVISION project. So I think with that, Suja, have I missed anything?
No, I think you are great. It's all outlined. Very good. Thank you very much.
Well, great. Well, then I think we get into our spotlights. So we have a running order just by alphabetical /surname. So that means Simon is going to start. Simon, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks so much, Kay, and hello everyone. So yes, I'm Simon Bateson. I'm an early years practitioner working at Cowgate Under 5's nursery in Edinburgh. I'm also, as Kay's mentioned, co-director of Froebelian Futures, which is a major new initiative in Scotland to deepen Froebelian child and community-centred early years practice across the country. I'm also formerly founder director of the UK's social justice film festival, Take One Action, which has featured a number of films through the years made with and by children for a global audience. And my own practice with children is rooted in dialogic pedagogy. So with this, as any other question, I'm asking, what does each child bring to this issue, to the process, to a process? How do they engage with and value visual autoethnography, visual self-representation? And conversely, to what extent are they being led, coerced, co-opted onto any side of any debate or adult representations? Before discussing research, just a broader view of children's images, we know many children want to be seen as well as heard in the digital worlds in which they are native. But also that there is pressure on children to be seen in ways that don't dignify them or deny them any choice, let alone final choice in the matter, abuses which we must take incredibly seriously. Historically, of course, children have been largely omitted from the public visual record beneath signification through the ages, or when they are included, it has been on adult terms, romanticized or othered, demonized even. As an extension of this, the children I work with capably signal most times that they can feel disempowered by both inclusion and exclusion from photographic and videographic record making. So on balance, and with many caveats, I think I come down at the start of this conversation on the side that participatory research, and I use the term advisedly, participatory research, which is fully partnered with children as co-researchers, has the potential to give children real ownership of their visual representation, not just within a project, but as a legacy to that work in their day-to-day lives. The power to define what dignity in self-representation does and does not feel and look like aesthetically, systemically, politically. While there are no hard and fast rules, I think this can apply from about 18 months of age, where highly skilled practitioners who know individual children well are involved. Under 18 months is something I think I have to park for another conversation, and obviously different groups of children will bring different issues. Conversely, if those of us concerned with children's rights do not engage constructively with children around the use of their images, I think there's a real danger that we don't equip them or those who represent them, parents, media, institutions, to foreground the child's interests and voice at the centre of these lived questions. Thanks for listening to those thoughts.
I mean, that was wonderful. And it's really struck with me about sort of the past absence from the public record in a way that they want to be represented. So great start. I'm just going to go straight on to John. John, and John's going to do PowerPoint.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks, Simon. Difficult one to follow, but I'll try and do that. And hopefully, Kay and everyone, you can see my slide here. Shout yes if you can, because I can't see the screen.
That's right, yes.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm just going to take a very different position from Simon here. And in fact, the one I'm going to argue for is no. The answer is no, we should not use children images online. And I'm going to use my expertise as a professor of childhood visual impairment and disability studies to argue why this should be the case in 3 minutes. And I'd just quickly like to thank the disability studies, the Centre for Disability Studies in Leeds as well, because they inform my thinking a lot of this. Okay, so look, it seems to me that we can easily see that the general public have really little insight into the daily living and to the social barriers and to the environmental barriers that children with disabilities have in full and active life, right? It's really difficult for the public to understand that, right? It's also, you know, do we see lots of living with disabilities being confronted in these social barriers? Do these images really resolve this online, or do they help to portray this continued existence of the environmental and social barriers? When we have images of children with disabilities online, they usually are often portrayed in one of a work about are children with disabilities, are they included or are they not? The work I'm doing with Kay and her team and the SIP team is about, are children safe? Are children with disabilities safe or not? Do we have a social justice angle or not for children with disabilities? And so often when we use images of children with disabilities, so often we use to show that they're not included. So often we show that they're not safe. So often we show that they're not included within a social justice framework. So does adding images of children online resolve this or reinforce this? I'd like to make the argument it reinforces this. How often do we show disabled children and people interacting with non-disabled, okay? Giving as well as receiving, okay? As getting support and giving support. Very rarely do we ever show children with disabilities as that agent of giving rather than as a recipient. Adding images of children with disability doesn't seem to support this equality at all. Don't do it, just don't do it. So how often do we show that holistic view of the child? We don't, we often show this one-dimensional view of disability. We often show it's, like I say, it's poverty or charity or receiving, that again, they're uneducated and again, they're not included. And so just by having images online, it's impossible really to show that holistic representation of the individuality of children with disabilities. We are just being one-dimensional of children with disabilities. Don't do it, just don't do it. And so this brings me on to, and I think this is quite an important point, especially after we've just seen the Paralympics, disability voyeurism. We see so many times that disabled children, we see them on images on TV adverts, we see them online, we see them in our research reports online as objects of curiosity. They are the sole objects of our research. This isn't right. This is not how we should see children with disability. It's disability voyeurism. Don't use images of disabled children. So we see this, the super cripple. We see the Superman theory of children with disabilities. Or adding online images. Are we being supportive of children with disabilities? Or really, are we just reinforcing that Superwoman, Superman narrative? Don't use those images. Whoa, I can hear Simon going, but what about children and agency and having a voice? And Simon's got a very, very good position. Absolutely. All children have a voice. But what it doesn't need, children do not need an adult to validate their voice. We don't need, yes, that's a good image for you to go online. That's not a good image, right? That's an adult validating the voices. So I agree with Simon. All children have a voice, but it doesn't need adults to validate it. So back to the use of images in disabled children. Look, don't use images of disabled children. An argument could be, well, we could just use images without disability, just use children without disabilities. That position takes you into a very dark and dangerous place, not acceptable at all. So therefore, I have to come to the conclusion, don't use any images of children at all. You don't get into this debate, just don't use any images of any children at all in our research. It's not needed. Thank you.
John, thank you. You offered to present that kind of view, and I just think it's really interesting how you're drawing on the disability studies with it. So thank you for that really thoughtful contribution. Good. Does that bring us to Irene next? Irene, over to you. And yeah, I think you can stop sharing, John.
Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to do that.
But Irene, do feel free to
Okay, Kay, thank you. Hello, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you are. First, I would like to say that, well, this is a very controversial debate, that we should be very, very open in discussing it, and that we always speak from our own experiences in working with children and our different cultures. So I'm speaking as a professor, a researcher, and an activist in children's rights in Brazil, and from the Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro and the International Center for Research and Policy on Childhood. I'll make a few points. First, to say that according to our laws and policies in Brazil, you cannot show children and youth from 0 to 18 any face, any image that they could be recognized, except of course when parents allow that. And this is another discussion, how adults use children's images, including in the media, in fashion. It's really incredible. Sexualizing very young children. All this is also very, very important to discuss. I'm going to speak from my own experience working for over 30 years directly with children and youth. So I will get closer to Simon's perspectives in the sense that there are risks working with very marginalized children, for example, on the streets. We just concluded a survey with over 500 kids on the streets, and over 50% of them said that they were persecuted and their rights violated by public safety agents. So they fear the police agents that should be protecting them in very dangerous situations. They fear these figures, which is terrible. And so you have to be extremely careful with images of children that are being persecuted by the drug trade, militia, the police. This is a reality. I know it's not only in the Brazilian slums, in other countries as well. Now I would like to turn to some other 3 aspects of our research that I think I will argue for being extremely careful in terms of ethics, listening very carefully to children and to those responsible for them in their communities and families. But as we do that, there will be different positions than no. For example, and first of all, using carefully images that that are different ways of doing it, and can bring restore humanity to children when they are seen playing and not in their slums with a gun or threatening people. They are seen as reading books, dancing, in theater, in arts, or their own videos talking about things that they think they want to share. That's one point. The second point is our experience in working in international projects, such as Kay mentioned. We work together looking at inclusive and safe and participative pedagogy. And in that, we are working with very young children. But I don't see how my partners around the world can even start to understand what it is to be in a slum, how they live, the physical aspect of the slum, and how the children circulate in some neighborhoods in the periphery of my city, for example, without looking at images. The third and last point is about participation, and that Simon already expressed it very well. We have our careful safeguarding policies in CSP. We are extremely careful, and we discuss constantly with partners that have been researching this issue. But we do want to listen to the children, especially older children, when they say, I want my image, I want my name. I want to say what I think. I want to express myself. Why are you talking about participation if I can't just express myself? I very much appreciate what John's position. I have been working with disabled children too. It's more complicated, maybe as complicated as working with very marginalized children. But the other day I was listening to a video by a 12-year-old girl, with a severe disability, and she could barely speak. She spoke for 15 minutes, completely deconstructing the idea that she could not express herself. It's in that case, it was so serious, and she was so powerful. She was so strong. And she said, you think I can't say what I can't express my thoughts. It's very hard for me, but I can do it. See, I'm showing you how I think, and this is my right to do this. Anyway, I hope that these ideas are thought-provoking and we have a great debate. Thank you.
Rennie, thank you, and thank you for sharing those particular examples. I think that's really, really helpful. Last but definitely not least, Rabab, can I turn over to you for a couple of minutes?
I will put my, I will check that my clock will remind me of the 3 minutes. Okay, hi everybody, I'm Rabab. I am from Palestine. I have 2 points to share in terms of the discussion here, and I echo with some of what Irene said. I think that when we talk about children's images, we are we are considering the wider picture, which is children's human rights, and not to be abused. Somehow, I think that in recent debates that I was engaged in, is that as if images is equivalent to children's human rights, and this is not the issue. I mean, sometimes we relate children's human rights without using images and children's photos. So we need to be very careful as researchers in terms of how we are seeing this issue from wider perspective, not from a narrow perspective. The other issue, which is very concerns me as Palestinian, is somehow this discussion was happening only in Western-oriented research debates, and as if we were marginalized from this wider discussion, and somehow it is imposed. So now as a Palestinian working with Scottish university, I have to follow their rules rather than to consider my culture and how we celebrate children. We enjoy seeing our children, and parents, they do enjoy to see, especially when we are not showing photos of children as it appears in other reports where children are to get audience sympathy and feeling sorry for those children more than seeing agency. So sometimes we have to be to read the context before assuming it is no and yes. This is why I disagree with John with the concrete no, as if we are reading the Bible or the Holy Quran. It is not that. It is about how we read the context and why we are using that. Is it, as what Irene said, is it because in order to raise awareness, or it is only to show a hidden agenda that we are trying to use as researchers? In my approach to how we our engagement in what we say participatory pedagogies. Participatory pedagogies is about working together, researchers and research, to have joint thinking and critical awareness about what we now discussing, taken for granted issues, and to rethink about it from people's perspective. So when we talk about photos and we work with parents and adults and children, we bring these issues and we say, do you think that we using these photos can show what you want to say, or can be done indifferently? So we do not decide on behalf of the people. If we are really engaged in participatory pedagogies, we decide with the people, regardless of the international perspective about showing photos or not showing. Thank you.
Rabab, that was so succinct, but so powerful. And the use of the word celebration, I thought was...
Okay, you disappeared, yeah?
My mind's spinning, and Marlies, I'm going to hand over to you to see where we get to collectively.
Yes, thank you so much, Simon, John, Irene, and Rabab, for your really passionate and really thought-provoking contributions. So I think you've raised so many issues already around the whole nuances around this topic, from representation to consent to legacy to ownership. So we're now really delighted to open it up for wider discussion. We're inviting everyone here to contribute. You can share any questions you have for the panelists. You can just share responses or reflections. We're also really keen to hear about practical examples, maybe how you've solved some of these issues in your projects. You can do that either by posting a question or a comment into the chat or the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and then Suja will enable you to speak as well. If you do that, we really invite you to introduce yourselves as well. So before we start, Kay has kindly put together a list of some tricky issues that are kind of common themes in a lot of projects. Could you put that slide up, please, Suja?
And not to forget that Harry also came in with some really tricky ones too.
Sorry, yes.
When we were cooking.
So I think we've already got quite a lot of tricky issues to respond to from the panelists. I have lots of questions already, but here is some more ideas that you might have been thinking about or experiencing in your own projects, perhaps.
Sorry, Marlies, I have some trouble with my Zoom at the moment, so I won't be able to share any screen. I can't really see any chat either.
Oh,
oh
no,
yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Marlies, you're amazing.
That's great. Thank you.
I got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, question of stock photos. We know that they're available. There are some reputable organizations and they presumably have informed consent. Is it ethical to use these photos, both internally within projects and externally in our communications? Let's say you have a project with children as co-researchers, which we've heard from some of the panelists as well, and they want their contributions to be recognized. Can they have their images with names up as part of the research team? Let's say children and parents give consent of a photograph of a child to be used, and that child is fully recognizable. Is this ethical if it's an image used as part of an online webinar, for example? And would it matter whether that child is an infant or not in terms of understanding the implications of this image being used? Facebook is always a contested area for research and images in particular. Let's say you have a private Facebook page as part of a project where participants and the team are wishing to share images of children. Would it be ethical to permit this, given especially what we know or don't know about all of Facebook's privacy issues as well? How long can we keep images of children? Should there be time limits from a project on how long we use them? And finally, I think many of us have done it or seen it with blurring the face of a child that is recognizable in a research report. Does that solve the issue? Is it helpful? And is it ethical? So these are some questions to get us started, but I want to first pass back to the audience to see if there's any questions directly to our panelists, perhaps, or anything you want to respond to. And I can see Katie has her hand up. Are you able to speak, Katie?
Suja has to give her permission. How's that going?
We can see your little box now, Katie, so I think you just need to unmute yourself, and if you want to share your video as well.
Katie, if you could type your question would be great, because at the moment I have some issue with my Zoom accessibility. So if you could type your question, and Marlies will answer that question for you. Thank you, Katie.
Okay, let's wait for Katie to put the question in the chat, and please other people come in as well. I think in the meantime, I might start to ask the panelists some of the things that I've been wondering about. So I'm going to start with you, John, because we had the clearest, most extreme position, perhaps. I was wondering, all the things you raised, very important considerations around representation, is this a dilemma that applies only to children, or would you say this is something more general that applies to adults as well?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question about that, because I think what you're really getting at is issues of consent, I think, there. So, I mean, I think in terms of gaining consent, I think the law is slightly different, isn't it? The law is different between those adults and children, even though of how the law represents consent from children and how the law represents consent from adults. So I think in terms of adults with disability, there is an issue of consent, but I would like to say all of those issues that I raised about disability voyeurism, about seeing the superhuman, Superman efforts, about seeing an unholistic view of disability apply both to children and applies both to adults. So I'm totally reluctant to use images of adults as well in that, although there is an issue that adults with disability can entirely give that consent as well. So it's really, and I think it's Irene and particularly Rabab mentioned this, it's about how we are representing and how we are using those images of children online and those images of children with disability. And if I can just quickly respond to your very first question while Katie tries to type into the box. You know, the use of stock images, right? It's a very interesting question, and I'm totally opposed to that. It serves to me no function. It doesn't either reinforce what you're going to show, and it doesn't really reinforce maybe the idea of what you're trying to represent in terms of your report or your research. And so I would be opposed to using stock photos of images, and particularly stock photos of images of children with disability. I'm not sure that whilst it has been given by the parent and the child for the stock company to use it, it's not being given for our research, and so I would oppose that. So it's an issue of consent, Marlies, and it's an issue of representation would be my response to that. But great question.
Does any one of the other panelists want to come in on that? Or Helen, yes, please.
If kind of to answer a question, but also to give a question, thank you, John, for your very clear and precise position that you stand on. I find it interesting that when we do research on adults, we don't think to photograph them. But when we're doing research on children, we go and lift a camera. Why? Why should we treat the two different cohorts differently? And it was just food for thought, if anybody wanted to comment.
Yes, excellent point.
Helen, I'll come in briefly. I think that's an excellent point about, you know, our tendency to objectify children. It's a really valid point, and I think we have to be really careful. I mean, in terms of John's kind of arguments about not having children, not having adults validate which images are okay for children. I completely agree. I think we have to put the power back in the hands of children, or recognize that they have that power already, I suppose. And we need a revolution in practice. Our current practices are not fit for purpose. Certainly stock image libraries, ethical policies on consent and use of children's images are not fit for purpose, and we've got a huge amount we could do to engage positively in that, but they're not going to go away at the same time. And I think we have a real opportunity to influence that if we can proactively engage with what an ethical approach and a skilled approach looks like to putting really locating the power and agency in children's hands around self-representation.
Simon, I can see Harry's got his hand up, and then Irene next.
Thank you, Marlis. Yes, a lot of my earlier work was not so much doing research on children, but supporting research by children. So my question would be whether in those circumstances there's a special case, because we certainly liked it when the children showed enthusiasm for taking photos and using photos of their research reports, and they will always choose photos to put in their reports, photos showing them doing the research. And one of the reasons I like that, not just respecting the children's wish to do it, but also it's helped the organization convince the skeptical that yes, the children really did do this research. This really was peer-to-peer research. The children actually did the work. The children analyzed the data because they've taken pictures of themselves doing it, and the children created the report and so on. So would that be a special case? Could a case be made when children do research for them choosing to use photographs of themselves doing it as a way of promoting their own achievements? Thank you.
Great point. Do you want to come back on that one, Simon, or maybe Irene, you can respond?
Yeah, just to add to that, I thought Helen's point was really interesting. We working with adults, we are more comfortable because we assume that they will use images the way they want, and they don't have to ask permission to anyone. I think we are mostly addressing the question of research and young people working with us in research. The first point is that I think very young children and older children, these are different ways of dealing with it, particularly working with older kids and youth, that they pretty much have more autonomy to use images the way they want, but we can always discuss within the project, the research team. But just to put a little more wood into the burning fire already, think about all the images we see of children from like middle-class families in Facebook, for example. Sometimes it really bothers me, and people are just trying to show how cute that children are, completely unaware of some of those images, how they could be used and how the child would feel looking at them. Just to one more point that I think it's part of this discussion.
Yes, absolutely. Rabab, I see your video is on. Do you want to come in on this point?
Sorry, it goes and comes. I have internet problem. I mean, Irene, you said about parents, how they put, I mean, if I want to comment, I have serious problem when I see UNICEF and Save the Children and those reports where children are always reflected as, even John, if you see carrying their damaged hands or their disability, all of them Black, Muslims, Arabs, head covered, while all the white children in those reports are doing creative art, others, third world, Latin Americans, Black, always carrying a pencil and writing. So for me, this is a hidden agenda that we need as researchers to be careful about. It's not about how it is just to serve specific agenda or not. I believe when we are engaged in participatory research, and this is the power of participatory research, is to engage in this discussion and to talk to the people to say, why would you see that this is an issue? I had discussion with parents about why they see that putting their photos of their children on the Facebook gives them power, gives them. So during the discussion, we are engaged in different critical awareness. And this is the main purpose of participatory pedagogy, is that you do not come with your agenda to say what is right and what is not. I cannot tell children, oh, we shouldn't put your photos, but I would engage them in a discussion to say, why do you think, who might misuse your photo when it is online? What do you think? So we need them to be powerful and to see this hidden agenda, even when we are not engaged with them in research. So I think that's what we need to be very careful about how we see participatory research, not as traditional research. When you are coming as researcher, you interview and you leave, and then you do whatever you want, passive research. But when children are engaged as active researchers, engaging with you. So, I mean, I use children's engagement in specific activity, and then I invite parents to discuss what they learn from what they observe about children's learning. So this is for us, sometimes we use photos and images and short videos in order to raise continuous awareness about child development and learning.
Thank you, Rabab. Really great points about the importance of the process as well. Kay, I can see you have your hand up. Do you want to come in? And then we're going to go to a couple of questions from the chat afterwards.
Oh, good. I was going to draw your attention to those. And I think Rabab was already starting to address one of them. Then maybe if I take my 30 seconds is just real reminder with Irene's comments and things. And I don't know if we're encouraging more for children to be online in whatever of those kind of roles. I guess it's just that, you know, those concerns about basically social media is still a business, and in terms of are people profiting off, I suppose, in some ways, in terms of increased children's presence, just to put forward that argument, you know, just riffing off Irene a bit. But yes, should we hand over to the other ones in the chat?
Yes, thank you, Kay. So there was one question which I agree, Rabab, you've kind of partly responded to already, about what is your view on using images of children in NGO reports which are used in advocacy work, provided that informed consent is given?
Well, I'm happy to come on that, as it names me. Well, be no surprises. Well, it seems to me that the discussion's coming my way a little bit. Rabab has already highlighted, you know, the UNICEF's, the reports on where you have those images of children with disabilities, of poverty, of not included. All of those things are just replicated. And I understand, and look, I even have a UNICEF mug here that I support, and obviously support all of that work that's been done. I work with Sight Savers, you know, and they're one of the worst. You see them on TV and you think, oh my God, stop showing these images of children with disabilities and children in Africa with flies around in the park. It's just not acceptable. So I'm not at all in favor of any of that as well. And so I want to get back to Harry's point a little bit about children with research and showing their images. I think as a methodology, I think absolutely it's great, it's fantastic, and indeed I've used it myself, and my PhD students use it all the time, working with children, working with photos and images. And I'm going to join that up with Helen's point in the sense that, look, we don't have images of ourselves on the reports. We don't, you know, as a research team, I'm not necessarily want to have my photo on the front page of a report. I don't want that, you know, no one wants to see my ugly mug. Why do I want to see a child on that? Why do I want to see the child's report? So it's that odd objectification of children that we're using in research. And particularly, well, my point would be with children with disability, to reinforce that objectification, that we should just not do it and not use children at all in displaying our research images. This isn't to say we shouldn't be participating with research. It's a different thing, and obviously I'm I work with children all the time on that, but it's that using of images that are different of how we would do it as an adult to really reinforce what we're trying to say in our report. It's an objectification. So that's enough for me. Thanks, Molly.
Thanks, John. Yeah, it's really interesting what all of these viewpoints reveal about our constructions of childhood, isn't it? All the questions around ethics. There is another really great question in the chat. Have the panel got any views on the child's right to be forgotten? Is anyone here interested in answering that question? So I assume we're talking about a child's right to have their record deleted from the online world. Yeah, Kay, you've got your hand up.
And Coleman, what a great question, and don't know whether you want to keep going in the chat, and I'd love to know your opinion. I mean, technically, under data protection in European, I mean, that's come in as a concept legally, isn't it? So we were sharing just a bit in the chat, was it with yourself, Helen, before, is that I was quite intrigued. I understand our Commissioner's office in Scotland, at least for a while, had a policy that they had to have renewed consent from children to be able to keep using the photograph after whatever time frame it was. I think it was 5 years. Anyway, so that's an interesting kind of aspect of it. I suppose the thing, and again, Coleman, I'm really interested in what you say is, with the digital is that it's really hard to be forgotten online. I think that's part of what feels sticky to me, and people can pick up that image almost always and go and use it in a completely different way. So, I know when I'm working with children or talking about this, there's a certain amount that I sort of feel like you just have to let it go if it's gone online. So yeah, I'm troubled by that because I'd like to think that, but I think it's hard to do it if you're doing it through social media or online.
Thank you, Kay. And I was wondering, yes, Coleman is willing to respond. So Suja, could you just enable him to speak, please?
Sorry, Harry, can you enable Coleman?
Yeah, I'm allowing.
Please, thank you.
Clicking. Oops.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's just an interesting concept. We have a lot of conversation around that in Ireland about children's right to be forgotten, but it's a fairly laborious, cumbersome process to apply for it, and the child can only apply in retrospect. And a lot of the law or is a bit tokenistic in some respects. There's an opportunity there, but it's really cumbersome. The reality, I think, comes down to that children get a lot of clicks. They are clickbait. The reason we have them on the cover of policy documents or why we share things online is that children are very good at getting traction in terms of the popularity of your project or the expansiveness of it. And I think it comes down to again, I would question the idea of asking a 5-year-old for their consent to put a picture on Facebook. I'm not so sure a 5-year-old can decide when they've had enough ice cream, whether they can decide whether they can have a digital footprint or not. I'm not entirely sure either. But I think the issues you make, Kay, is absolutely right. Even though we can put in everything around children's right to be forgotten, the capacity to screenshot, to share images, to truly erase anything online is dubious at the best of times. And so I'm not even sure it's altogether possible. But my own view on it is I don't have the answer for whether we should be using them or not. But I do think we need to be placing a lot more, because I don't think it's a digital footprint. I think it's more a digital tattoo, actually. I think it's much more difficult to remove than perhaps the word of a footprint would suggest. But yeah, I'm just really interested by the discussion. I'm nodding along to everyone's point of view without being able to take a position on any of them. But it's just really good that we're having this conversation, and I really appreciate being part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got Irene next, and then Simon.
Yeah, just very briefly. First of all, Coleman, I appreciated the question. I think to be open is to also have completely different perspectives on the table as well. I just don't like the term forgotten. Maybe if we forget the term forgotten, because who wants to forget a child, or who wants to be forgotten? Sometimes being totally silent and awake is a sign of depression and other mental conditions and that can worry us, but perhaps have more opportunities for the child, for example, not really participate, which is something we often discuss. The right not to be participating. We are very often assume that this is a great thing. Everybody wants to participate, and participation is a neat thing. When it comes for a child being part of the drug trade, then that participation is, of course, not seen as something, or even a participation. So good to add some of these other completely different perspectives to our debate.
Thank you, Irene, for bringing another nuanced perspective. And Simon, can I ask you to be within 1 minute? And then we've got a contribution from Lucy who would like to speak afterwards. And then I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up.
Sure. Yes, I mean, needless to say, I think that search engines and social media platforms have a huge amount more that they should be doing. But I think that we underserve children if we think that they can't engage in, as has been said, in meaningful dialogue around these issues from a very young age, and in terms of the right to be forgotten, I think there's a greater risk, which has just been mentioned, which is that, you know, the right to be seen and to be visible in the public space. And I think it's a balance of risks, but the idea that we can keep children completely safe from these risks is, I think, that's not possible. So then it's, you know, how do we really engage constructively with the world as it is, with young children?
Thank you. And I guess that links back to your point from earlier, Rabab, about making the process a pedagogical one as well. So Lucy, you placed a question in the chat, but do you want to make the point or ask it yourself?
Okay, so building on what Simon's just said, I mean, children have digital lives and digital footprints, and we're talking about a very specific aspect of our engagement with them as researchers and their engagement with the broader world. You know, children are engaging from early adolescence, certainly, even in the poorest communities in these forums. And we took several groups of children that we'd been working in partnership and participatory research. Number one, they very much see it as their choice because they are as equal partners, they own some of their findings, and they want to be part of the dissemination and the advocacy in relation to the research. But we brought them together to determine the rules for engagement and to involve them fully in how we could make choices about the rules for the use of images and taking images. And one of the critical and most convincing points for me was that one of the young women said, look, you know, most of the dialogue between children online is very superficial. And we have an opportunity to use the work that we've been doing with you and that we are, in that instance, presenting to Parliament to show leadership and to show something really positive to our peers. And we were working with children in care, we were working with refugees and children with disabilities, and there are all sorts of complexities in the law, but working together, we were able to come up with a set of rules that enabled everybody to be confident that we were keeping children safe, respecting individual choice, but allowing them to be able to share the research and tell their stories and show leadership in their communities. And I just think we've got to turn this debate around slightly and think about, well, how do we use these opportunities in order to capacitate children to make good decisions about the research that we and the work that we do with them, but also that then has a positive aspect on the dialogues that they are, the many dialogues that they are having in other spaces. And we're running out of time. This is a thoroughly exciting debate, and so glad that you are leading this series. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. And yeah, I think that was a really thoughtful contribution to end on. And I'm afraid we're going to have to end because we're nearly out of time. And I'm just going to pass over to Helen for some concluding remarks now.
Thank you everyone today for attending. Thank you for joining us. It has been a pleasure to listen to everybody's views. To sum up, how can I sum up? It is a continuing discussion. It will evolve and develop, but it's a very crucial one that we need to keep talking about and to consider all viewpoints. And I think Kay said it, or was it Suja at the very start, to be respectful of everybody's views. And I think even as panelists, we all have very distinct views, and we do have to keep that open mind that there are alternatives. And going back to one of the panelists mentioned the people's perspective on this as well, so that we are not just the researchers' perspective, but also from the general public coming as well. I would love to see how this evolves and develops in the years to come. And I think this is only the beginnings of something that will evolve even further. Again, thank you for attending. To let you know that we have recorded today's session, so we hope to make it available in the near future to those who wish to have it. And to, even though we've been talking about the goods and the bads of social media, do tweet about us, do hashtag us. Let the world know that this is a discussion that we do need to have. And thank you very much again for your time and your energy that you've put into today. Thank you from me, the COVISION team, and everybody else.
Thank you, everyone. I think it's the start of a discussion. Lovely ending, Helen. And my sympathies about Suja and the Zoom. It's not one thing, it's another, but I think we coped well. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's a result, but my mind is spinning in a good way, I think.
Well, there's definitely, I mean, maybe you guys might think of organizing a stage 2 or something, picking up where we've left off, you know?
I was thinking, I mean, the obvious is like, while we're all in touch with children and young people, they were directly part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Bye. Bringing in their views and so on. Okay, anyway, thank you so much, everybody.
Gotta go and cook lunch.
Yeah, brilliant. Speak to you all soon.
Keep in touch.
See you all soon. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.